Welcome to our MHS Rigor and Relevance Framework and Rubrics Review. Today we'll review the framework and do some video calibrations to gain more fluency with the rigor and engagement rubrics. So we've got some work to do in order to meet today's objective. This video will help refocus us on the Rigor and Relevance initiative that is part of the district's T24 plan. Let's start with rigor and continue to develop some common language around it. Rigor is about a continuum of thinking, from acquiring knowledge to assimilating it. How challenging is the learning? When we think about rigor, think about reaching the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Working at higher levels of Bloom's generates higher levels of rigor. Our job is to design lessons that allow for opportunities to reach all of the levels of the taxonomy. Remember, rigor is about thinking. It's about quality, not quantity. So at the knowledge level, it's about recall, and at the comprehension level, it's showing understanding by translating information. Take a look at the verbs list in green at each level, keeping in mind that context is everything. The work of the student reflects the real level of rigor. For example, compare these two activities. Make a list of things you would expect to find in a typical Cuban high school versus make a list of the reasons why you think the U.S. has perpetuated the embargo against Cuba for over 50 years. Which list is easier to make? Which one makes you think more deeply? It's really more than just picking a verb. Context is everything. Moving up the taxonomy, we have application and analysis. Notice the example for application. It says, use a ruler to determine square footage. Notice it does not say, use the area formula to find the square footage. It's not really application level work if we tell how to do it. Better still, take out the part about the ruler. Then students really do have to apply what they know about square footage to get the job done. At the highest level of Bloom's, there's synthesis and evaluation. Synthesis is about creating something new. Evaluation is about making a judgment of some sort. So it's time to engage your brains a bit. Take a look at this 5th grade TEKS. Analyze the reasons for the location of cities in the U.S., including state capitals, and explain their distribution, past and present. In pairs, you're going to develop activities that align to this TEKS for each level of the knowledge continuum. Your facilitator will distribute handouts that look like the right side of this slide. The directions are on the handout along with some information on the back that might help you. Facilitators, please pause the video now to allow time to complete and debrief this activity. This is the rigor rubric that was used last January when we viewed lesson videos. It's meant to be used as a collaborative tool for us to use as lessons are planned. Facilitators have copies for you. Take a few minutes to look at the 3 elements of rigor and read their descriptors. Then answer the questions on the back of the rubric. Facilitators, please pause the video to allow time to complete this activity. Okay, let's move on to relevance now. Again, we want to develop common language around this idea. Relevance happens when kids make connections to other classes, technology, real world, and life. It's our job to facilitate making those connections. Moving along the application continuum increases the relevance of the learning to life and work. So let's review the application model for relevance. The lower levels are knowledge and application in one discipline. From there, it advances to application across disciplines. At the highest levels, we see application to real-world predictable and unpredictable situations. An example of knowledge in one discipline is using online references for definitions. An example for applying in discipline would be using internet sources for research. An example for application across disciplines is collaborating with others via the internet. In addition to content, communication skills and technology skills are necessary here. An example for applying to predictable situations would be collecting data in the field with handheld devices. And finally, an example for applying to unpredictable situations is developing a multimedia presentation. It's very open-ended, so student products would be very unique. A highly relevant lesson asks students to tackle issues where a variety of solutions are possible. A relevant lesson answers these three questions. What am I learning? Why am I learning it? How will I use it? This is an application model decision tree that you'll get a copy of to help you work through the next activity. It will help you determine the relevancy level of activities. So it's time to put on your thinking caps again. Using the same 5th grade TEKS that you worked with earlier, develop activities for each level of relevance. Feel free to work with a partner or a group of 3. Your facilitator will distribute the handouts that look like the right side of this slide. The directions are on the handout, along with the decision tree on the back to help you. Facilitators, please pause the video now to allow time to complete and debrief this activity. This is the relevance rubric we'll be using later today. Read through the descriptors tied to each of the 3 elements of relevance. Then answer the questions on the back of the rubric. Facilitators, please hand out copies of this rubric and pause the video to allow time to complete this activity. Now that we've reviewed the knowledge taxonomy addressing rigor and the application model dealing with relevance, let's tie it all together in the framework. This is the rigor and relevance framework we first studied last year. Notice the vertical axis representing rigor and the horizontal axis representing relevance. Remember, our goal is to develop lessons that touch each of the 4 quadrants. Quadrant A represents acquisition, Quadrant B represents application, Quadrant C represents assimilation, and Quadrant D represents adaptation. This framework serves as our instructional umbrella. These are some sample student products by quadrant. Please remember that the product alone does not make for rigor and relevance. It's the content within that really matters. Here's another representation of the framework with some helpful descriptors. You can pick up a copy of this representation at the end of this session from your facilitator. You can use this rigor and relevance framework to evaluate your curriculum, your instruction, your assessments, and your classroom activities. It can also be quite helpful when you're planning your lessons. Another way to look at the quadrants is shown here. Quadrant A lessons require lots of work on the teacher's part. Quadrant B lessons require students to do more of the work, while Quadrant C lessons require lots of student thinking, and Quadrant D lessons push students to do the working and the thinking. As you move to the next phase of today's training, keep this image of the rigor and relevance framework in your head. At this time, please continue working your way through our Professional Learning Network website. Thank you for your attention.